Hello and welcome to Midnight ISO Production. This is a My F1 show regarding the recent Bahrain 2021 Grand Prix. And so, the season has begun, and what a season it is set up to be. After testing, we could see that Red Bull and Mercedes were very close on pace, which it turned out to be exactly that in qualifying. If at least during practice, it looked like Red Bull had the pace for qualifying and for the race. However, we were treated to a magnificent show under the lights between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, with a lot going on in the mid-pack just behind. All I can say is what a weekend it was to start off the year. The only minor side was a few track limit issues, shall we say, and a couple of poor races towards the back of the field, but otherwise a very clean, very exciting weekend. And one good thing to look forward to is that it looks like the gap to the front-running team, which to me is still the dominant Mercedes team, is greatly reduced compared to 2020 or even 2019. So, let's have a quick look at it. So, Mercedes. I've set them as the benchmark for this. Essentially, if a team has 0% to Mercedes, it means they are the same approximate speed. And I've put Mercedes as the dominant team here because, well, if you factor in Perez's lap didn't reach Q3, then on average pace Red Bull were slightly worse, even if Max did take the pole. It's really good to see Ferrari up mixing it in the top grouping again, alongside McLaren and Red Bull, if slightly still off the pace. But it looks like that 2020 debacle regarding their power unit has finally been put aside. It is worth noting on this that there are sort of three jokers in this pack here. Obviously Vettel had a terrible qualifying, so did Ocon for Alpine, and so did Perez for the Red Bull. But one thing that I am really glad to report is that the team's sort of gap year on year has massively reduced to Mercedes, well, for at least a couple of the teams. Ferrari were, I believe, 1.7 seconds off pole last year, and they closed 74% of that gap to be only 4 to 5 tenths of Mercedes this year. That is impartial due to the 2021 regs hampering Mercedes more than others, and basically benefiting any car with a high rake or those that have managed to absolutely ace the new rule set. You can see Red Bull, they had a bit of a bad year with Albon last year, so you're probably always going to see Red Bull playing catch up to Mercedes, and it's great to see McLaren have reduced a lot of their gap too, even if it is a lot smaller number than that of the Ferrari. Now, there were a couple of underperformers, particularly in qualifying, from Alpine, Aston Martin and Haas. Put it in short, Haas had a terrible weekend all in all, especially with Mazepin. Aston Martin, well, Vettel didn't get out of Q3, and Ocon had another terrible race weekend in qualifying at least for Alpine, the former Renault team. Right, let's look at this. Going forwards, I've decided to reward certain teams and drivers with a little bit of fun achievements for the team. So, let's have a look. Simply put, a winner will get a yellow star, a driver of the weekend will get a white star, driver of the race, a green star, a car or team with mechanical failure will receive a black star, and a driver that basically bins it or causes his own retirement will get a red star. Oh, and one more for fun. A Donkey of the Weekend award. Now, this can be awarded to either a team or driver, but for those that watch the race, I'm thinking you're probably going to know who's going to get this one this weekend. But let's go and have a look at the actual teams. Now, all the teams had something to talk about this weekend, be it from the new regs or a fantastic performance during the race. But during the race, I think it's safe to say, yeah, Mercedes are still kings, if only just. But they did pick up one win, so good on them. So, Hamilton, as far as I'm concerned, we had an outstanding weekend. Not on the absolute pace of Max Verstappen, but arguably he got all out of that car and held back one hell of a lot of pressure from Max in the closing laps. And quite frankly, he really did deserve the win and driver of the race. And then there's Bottas. Yeah, he kind of just existed there. He had a slow pit stop, which is obviously down to the team. He did pick up fastest lap, 1 point bonus. But there's not much he can really shout about this weekend. He kind of just existed, came home third. And that is about it. But credit to Mercedes, from where they looked like where they were in testing, they really managed to pull it out of the bag, if only just over Red Bull. So Hamilton, amazing race, absorbed all that pressure. Quite frankly, an amazing performance. Moving on to the Ferrari boys. So, okay, Sainz, he brought the car home for his first race with Ferrari. He did what was asked of it. He's still learning the team, learning the car. They've all only had 1.5 days worth of testing in the cars each, and he's still bedding into the team. So solid performance, nothing to complain about, if just lacking a little bit of outright pace. Leclerc, he really has a tendency of qualifying where he shouldn't. How he got it up in that so high in Q3, I'll never know. And he held on to the back of Norris for P5 at the end of the day, and had a good scrap with him. So well done to Leclerc and Ferrari, particularly considering where they were last year, which is, we have a quick look. Yeah. Exactly. So, Ferrari. Nice. Right, Red Bull. We're going to start with Perez. Bit of a clanger to start with regarding to qualifying. Failed to reach Q3. But it did turn out that was a slight error from the Red Bull guys in terms of not allowing him the right tyres and prep to be able to reach there. So it was a little bit of a team error, a little bit of miscommunication going on there. And then come the race, obviously starting 11th, nope. Broke down on the opening install lap, and then managed to get it back to the pits. Bloody well done for that, Sergio. And then started from the pit lane. So, essentially, a kind of repeat as what happened in his Sakir Grand Prix at the end of last year, where he won. Well, this time, he's an arguably faster car. But, wow, what a race from Sergio. He brought it all the way back up the field. I think he finished at 5th in the end. It's actually ahead of Leclerc, so I think Leclerc was 6th. But seriously, absolutely amazing race from Sergio. Some great overtakes. And as always, fantastic on his long runs. That man has been said to have a traction control built into his right foot. And, well, quite frankly, I think he was worth his money this weekend. I couldn't have seen Albon, and potentially even Gasly, or any of the Red Bull juniors doing what he did. So, great call from the Red Bull management to put Sergio in that car. Well done, Perez. Now on to Verstappen. Well, simply put, driver of the weekend. And quite frankly, I think he deserves that without any argument, virtually, because he had the pace all weekend. However, he let himself down a little bit in the race by pushing a little bit too hard, potentially wearing out his tyres, trying to pass Lewis and passing him round the outside off the track, and that's a different discussion for another day. However, he did show a little bit of lack of judgment in the race by letting Lewis back through where he did. If he had waited until 2 or 3 corners later on the straight, blended out the throttle, let Lewis pass, and then gone for it down the main straight into turn 1, or even after the next DRS zone into that right-hander same corner, I believe he would have had the win. So, a little bit of immaturity, something that he'll learn from. Hopefully he won't do it again. But fantastic to see Max getting Red Bull's first pole of the hybrid era in the opening race at least. But he should have won. But it was great to see him battling with Lewis. And, yeah, all round, brilliant race from those guys. Okay, now on to the McLaren boys. Well, what a race from Norris it was. Quite frankly, finishing up there in fourth, being, okay, out-qualified by Ricciardo, but, you know, Ricciardo being Ricciardo, he's bloody fast. So, Norris, aggressive couple of opening laps, held fourth on merit. Quite frankly, cannot argue that one. Ricciardo had a bit of a quiet race. He was a little bit hindered by the McLaren strategy, which put him out a lap or two later than everyone else for the first stop. It dropped him behind the likes of Alonso, which lost him time, which I believe hindered his progress for the rest of the race, and he ended up finishing behind Leclerc. But good debut for Daniel for that McLaren. So, not much more to say about them. Solid race, but it's fantastic seeing them up there on merit and not lucking into a position. That Mercedes power unit seems to be really working for them. So, okay, that takes us to Aston Martin. Wow. Okay. What really to say? Vettel out in Q1. Never really looked at home in that car throughout all the practice sessions either. And then Q1 ignored the spinning Mazepin, ignored those yellow flags, and got himself some penalty points. So that's a great start. Then was he penalised at the back of the grid for his first race with the new team, which I can imagine Senior Stroll not being too pleased about. But he ran a one-stop ambitious strategy. Ran very highly in the points. I mean, all credit to Seb for getting that car, with that amount of experience he's had in the car, to that point. However, he didn't pay off. And as we know, later on he collided with Ocon and proceeded to blame Ocon for it, despite essentially ramming Ocon in the back. Which then collected him some more penalty points. So Seb's off to a fantastic debut with that team. So, yes. Stroll, okay, very quiet race. Quiet weekend for the man. Brought the car home. There's not really much more to say about it though. So, moving on. Alonso, welcome back to the sport, mate. Simply, but I think he had a cracking race. Gave it a go, showed his guts and all of his experience, and looked like he'd never been away. I think that was even said on commentary. So, well done, Mr. Fernando. Fought hard, reached Q3, which was very well considering the pace of the Alpine even compared to last year. Looks like he's lost pace. But due to a wrapper that got stuck in his rear right brake duct, forced him to retire, which unfortunately nets him a black star. Poor Fernando. Ocon, well, average to mildly poor race. Did fighting with Vettel, he got rear-ended, so that lost him time and potentially positions too. Other than that, he's had a very anonymous weekend. There's not much you can say about him, other than should have qualified better, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Okay, let us move on to the AlphaTauris. We can start with Tsunoda. What a debut race for him. Great first weekend, very mature drive. However, did have a very poor opening lap. I think he dropped back to 16th in the end. And he brought the car home in ninth for a pair of points, which is, do you know what, I think very admirable for your first race. However, he could have had more if he hadn't fallen back so far on the first lap. But it's his first weekend. Quite frankly, I think he deserves a very high grade for this weekend, and it's only going to be great to see how much he improves. He did show maturity beyond his years, and was mixing it with the likes of a quadruple world champion in Vettel, double world champion in Alonso, and Raikkonen, the 2007 world champion. Gave absolutely no quarters to gents, but kept it safe, kept it fast. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. And that brings us to Gasly. Well, qualifying, absolutely sensational qualifying. Which is what he kind of does, really. And then, well, due to a first lap incident, went back in the race, and yeah, rear-ended Ricciardo, losing his front wing, and ended up believe it was with gearbox issues, failing to finish the race. So, go! Gets a black star, unfortunately, but somewhat out of his control. That takes us to the Alfa Romeo boys in the old Sauber team. Raikkonen, well, moved forward during the race. Showed good racing skills, as he's always had. Didn't have the outright pace, but he finished ahead of his teammate. But obviously, Giovinazzi out-qualified him, which seems to be the pattern that seems to be going that direction. However, Giovinazzi tend to go somewhat backwards during the races. But a solid, if uneventful, race for the pair of them. So, okay, well done, lads. Okay, moving on to the Williams pairing. Wow, okay, Russell. Qualified really well again, got himself into Q2, which he's becoming a regular for, given that Williams has had a bit of a deficit on pace for the last several years, shall we say. Close to the points that he has been in 2020 for some of it, but it's nice to see him mixing up in the midfield with that like of those multiple world champions, if, sadly, going backwards during the race. Latifi, somewhat anonymous yet again, fell back in the race despite his 2 non-finishers and Gasly losing his front wing, etc. So, he also netted himself one of these as well for not finishing, but obviously mechanical this time. So, can't blame him for that. But, not fantastic for the Williams pairing, but it's good to see that the team are moving closer to the midfield and front, if slowly. So, okay. These boys. Schumacher, we're going to start with him. Decent first race, if a little bit anonymous. Sadly, had a spin after the safety car. However, even he was said, and to be quoted after the race, he was treating it largely as a testing session, which, given that lack of pace in that Haas, it looks like an absolute dog of a car. Yeah, can't really say much. Finishing at the back of the pack. Qualified, well, he managed it. Sadly, that car is not an enviable car to be in. And yeah, we're not going to see much of the Schumacher name this year, I believe. And that takes us to Mazepin. Now, I've had a few conversations about this gent recently, and I really must say I'm going to have to try and not be judgmental against the guy. He has come in off the back of a pre-season where he has riled up a large quantity of the internet with his social media posts. If you know, you know. However, putting everything aside, trying to remember his first Grand Prix, like Mick Schumacher there, and also Yuki Tsunoda, he's a rookie, but he made a heck of a lot of mistakes. That Haas may be a dog to drive, but he has to drive it. That's his job. That's what he's, air quote, paid to do, even if his father is a multi-billionaire that's financing the team. But you get the point. So, spun in practice multiple times, spun in qualifying twice, ruined other people's laps, overtook people in qualifying, which is against the gentleman's code, allegedly. And just like Grosjean the year before, seemed to find the magnets which are embedded in the track to make a Haas car just drive off the track at turn 4 and ended up in a barrier. And when I saw that, my literal words were, "Oh God, not again." Seeing that Haas spinning off that, I mean, that must be Grosjean's car, at least in soul. So, okay. I'm trying to be fair to the guy. It's his first race, but however, all those spins, all that trouble he caused, he does really deserve both a red star for spinning and a donkey award. And until he improves, that is how I'm going to view him. Now, I'm going to try and be fair, so I'm going to wipe that off. Actually, there's not much positive I can say about the man. I'm trying to think of something, and I can't. So we're just going to move on. Right. Moving on. So, those that have watched my 2020 review and my 2021 prequel will know I give drivers a DR ranking. For those that have played GT Sport, you'll know more or less what I'm on about. Essentially, I give qualifying a grade and a number, race, a grade and a number, mix them together, and what comes out of 10 is the rank that they get. So, I'll go into that a little bit more later. However, you can also see there's a bit of a disparity between all the drivers. You can clearly see Mazepin, Vettel, and not so much Ocon, but those two drivers had an abysmal weekend, with a couple of other drivers having very lacklustre. Schumacher and Latifi and Ocon, I'm looking at you, meh weekends. And you can see at the top, Hamilton and Verstappen winning basically all the rest of the awards, which is how it's been for the last season or two. So, well done to those gents. So the Constructors' Championship looks very much like this. Mercedes currently not running away with it, but out in the lead, with Ferrari, Red Bull and McLaren trailing behind. But it's only one race in, it's to be expected. There's always going to be one winner. Drivers' Championship, it's a familiar story. Hamilton out in front, which he has now been for, most of the last 5 to 7 years. So that doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise anyone, frankly. Given how much skill the man is demonstrating, he's still in his prime at 36, and Verstappen's going to have to keep pushing him into a mistake. So that's something to look forward to. Okay, now the last thing I want to look at is basically the rankings for the weekend. So, here is my ranking system. Outstanding for A star, A plus, near perfect, A impressive, B plus, well done, you can see the rest. Anything all the way down to E and F. So, let's have a quick look. I've ranked qualifying, the race, and the weekend as a whole. You add the qualifying and the race together with my little formula, and it spits out the weekend rank. So, let's have a quick discussion on that. Hamilton, A plus, easy. Not an outstanding weekend, didn't get pole. However, absolutely brilliant drive in the race. Yeah. Bottas, yeah, B plus. Sainz, solid, B minus. Leclerc, fantastic qualifying. Slightly average in the race. I mean, he was verging on a B plus to me, but didn't quite manage it as far as I'm concerned. Perez, fantastic race, terrible qualifying. Verstappen, amazing qualifying. And obviously in the race, could have done slightly better. Didn't quite perform as well as Hamilton as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, you end up with an A+. And all the rest you can see are largely, as you go down, they're sort of fairly consistent, except for obviously Vettel with a terrible qualifying, and Mazepin with a F's right across the board, sadly. There is one thing I would like to highlight here. WTF1, the other podcasters, those ladies and gents over there, these are their ranks. And you see a slight similarity, sort of 1 grade difference between all of them. And I can promise you, I did all of my ranking before I'd seen their podcast. So, I'm quite happy with my ranking system on that one. However, you may disagree. Feel free to let me know in the comments. Okay, so in highlight, on a hell of a weekend, again, I do think it was mildly overshadowed with all of the track limits issues, where Hamilton had been off the track allegedly 29 times. Allegedly, Tsunoda hasn't been penalised for passing Ocon at the same piece of track that Verstappen went around. However, I think the stewards deserve a little bit of a complaint towards him on this one. It needs to be one rule, hard and fast, for track limits. Not one for the qualifying, not one for the race. And it caught Verstappen out. Simple as that on that one. And he then did proceed to effectively break the rules and pass Hamilton off the track. So that, I hope, will be cleared up for Imola in the coming Grand Prix. It was great to see all of that action down the field and so many stories going on. I hope the drivers that didn't perform quite as highly as they wished pick it up for the next race. So, if you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to see in the further podcasts, please let me know. I'm willing to hear everyone's suggestions. But I hope you have enjoyed this. So thank you very much.